Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us for the first in what will be a series of 4 webinars examining some of the key issues addressed in the Papal Encyclical titled Magnifica Humanitas. Please note that if you'd like to attend the others as well, you'll need to register for each separately. Today, we will discuss the Encyclical's comments on AI and education, and we will save the last 15 minutes or so for questions from the audience, so please add yours in the Q&A box. Let me introduce today's participants. My name is Irina Raicu, and I'm the director of the Internet Ethics Program at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University. Over the past several years, I've participated in multiple conversations about the impact of AI in education and efforts to integrate it responsibly in that context, both within Santa Clara University and among various Catholic schools and universities. I've also written multiple articles about ethical issues related to AI's widening deployment. My colleague Ann Skeet is the Senior Director of Leadership and Business Ethics at the Markkula Center and co-author of a book on technology ethics. She is also a member of the AI research group convened by the Dicastery of Culture and Education at the Vatican. In that capacity, she is a contributing author to their book titled Educating in the Age of AI, Cultivating Integral Human Development, which will be published in September. Anne was previously the president of Notre Dame San Jose, a Catholic high school. And David DeCosse is director of the Religious and Catholic Ethics and Campus Ethics programs at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics. He has taught for many years in the Religious Studies Department at Santa Clara University. A Catholic theologian, he is especially interested in the intersection of Catholic theology with contemporary democratic culture and has written and edited books related to that theme. He is also a contributor to the book Encountering Artificial Intelligence, Ethical and Anthropological Investigations. So I'm going to get us started by asking David to give us some brief context about what an encyclical is.
Thank you so much, Irina, and welcome to everyone. Great to have you on the call for this conversation. Here's a little slide. So I'm guessing perhaps for many Catholics, the word encyclical is at least somewhat familiar, but for many others, it's perhaps a very strange word. The word is derived from a kind of ancient use of sort of a circular letter that was sent out by an authoritative person within a particular region of the Christian world out to churches in that region about perhaps disputed questions that may have come up in some way. So in the modern church, and I'll say modern over the last couple of centuries, encyclicals have been used by the Pope to go out to sort of churches all around the world within the Catholic communion to address disputed questions of some kind. So Magnifica Humanitas is an encyclical in that larger tradition. More specifically, it's part of what's called the social encyclical tradition, meaning it is a teaching document issued by Pope Leo, and understanding that the Pope in the Catholic tradition is thought to be the decisive and most authoritative interpreter of how this long ancient tradition applies to the disputed questions of the day. So one thing here with this document, among others, that is important to note, an encyclical sounds very intra-Catholic, but this encyclical is specifically addressed by Pope Leo to Catholics and to all people, or as the phrase goes, to all people of goodwill. So the idea with this document in particular is Pope Leo would like to open up a conversation with all people about how we respond to the challenge of AI in our times. I want to note there a couple of other important things. Pope Leo is drawing on the theological tradition of the church, things about the nature of God, what it may mean for human beings to be created in the image and likeness of God, and other matters. But from those beginning theological presumptions, he is drawing out reasonable principles, moral principles that he believes can open up a larger conversation with all people of goodwill about how to respond to AI. So Pope Leo is very clear in the document saying, the Catholic Church doesn't own the truth. The truth is a common good. The church comes to this conversation in a spirit of openness. Hey, these are our ideas, our principles, our ancient tradition brought to play in this very contemporary time. We would love to open up a conversation with everyone about how we all can respond to this challenge. One last thing about the idea, the word encyclical. Back in 1891, Pope Leo XIII issued a very famous encyclical called Rerum Novarum. And that document very clearly extended the church's moral teaching to the economy. In that document also, Pope Leo XIII in that document also very carefully, very clearly noted, we are entering a new era with the onset then of the Industrial Revolution with a whole set of new questions. I think it is fair to say that Pope Leo XIV in this document, Magnifica Humanitas, is making an analogous move. He is extending the church's moral thought to the breaking brand new world of AI. And he is noting too, we are at a change of era. With many new things coming with the onset of this technology, things that will affect us in very deeply personal ways, in social ways, within our church communities and families and beyond. So that's a little background on the meaning of an encyclical. I hope that helps open up our conversation a little bit more.
Thank you so much, David. And in the spirit of conversations, I had asked each of us to find 3 things that struck us in particular in the encyclical about AI and education. We all work in education. We know that people are really interested and concerned on this topic. So I'm going to ask David to get us started again. What are 3 things that struck you in particular in this encyclical?
Yes, Irina. So I think I'm approaching this a bit as a theologian, although as someone who has taught a lot in the classroom and taught many ethics classes and classes that have involved, for me, over many years, a lot of writing on the part of students. The 3 things that jumped out at me were, I would say, 1 is sort of who are we and what are we here for? 2, the issue of trust. 3, the issue of who chooses. So for the first issue, who are we and what are we here for? I am so struck in the document by the way it acknowledges the importance of freedom, intelligence, technical ingenuity, building things, all of these great aspects of human life. And it notes them, it applauds them, and it says they are not sufficient. That those aspects of life have to be embedded in a more deeply true understanding of the human person, which is that we are created for communion, for relationship, for love. For Catholic Christians, meaning for relationship with God, with other human beings, with creation. But I think Pope Leo is offering to everyone the claim that we all are created for relationship in some way, and that our thinking about AI has to be fundamentally in that context. So what does that mean a little more in terms of school? I think we can never think of our students as just constituted by intelligence. They always have a will, they always have affections, they always have desires, they always are facing questions of commitment, of happiness understood in that way. And I think we have to think of them that way when we address things in what we teach and how they approach teaching. I think for me, I'm borrowing from our colleague Brian Greene in saying this, but I think that means we can never be satisfied with outcomes. And when we're dealing with AI in education, we always have to keep the focus on character, on the kind of hard choices that people have to make, our students have to make as they work through material and come to master it. And then also on the choice of not just that, but what is this for? What is this for? This is for ultimately, in some way, building a better, more humane world. So, second issue, trust. I was so struck in the document by its emphasis on education and trust. I think in a larger picture, looking at the state of higher education in the US, I know the issue of trust has been an extremely important one. A lot of people have lost trust in higher ed for all kinds of reasons. I think it's so important as we think about integrating AI into education that we do it in the context of what facilitates trust, what inhibits trust, that we keep our eye focused on that. Finally, for me, the issue of who chooses. And this for me comes from the document's very, very clear and powerful analysis of how the AI is kind of being captured by a very monopolized sense of technological and economic power. And that power, the document notes this clearly, is kind of privatized. It's not regulated. It's hard to control it. It's kind of doing its thing. And for me, I think, we see this as it plays out with things like data centers around the United States. You can see communities up in arms. What's going on? We have no say. It's coming in here. We don't want this. I think there's a similar question we need to ask about the role of AI in education to kind of recover a real sense of agency within educational communities about what we're doing with this amazing new technology.
Thank you so much. And Anne, what about you? What struck you?
Yeah, so some of the themes that stood out to me were around the purpose. David talked about what is our purpose. What stood out to me was sort of the purpose of education that Pope Leo carves out in this document and reinforces many years of Catholic social teaching around that. The second was around schools as a sacred space. And the third was around the call for discernment and agency. So on that first point about the purpose of education, as I say, Catholic social teaching has been clear on this for many years. It's to foster integral human development, to educate the whole person. And he talks about this early in the encyclical in chapter 2, where he goes through Catholic social teaching, draws on a previous encyclical from Paul VI about the fact that development is authentic only if its meaning it can foster the development of each man and the whole man. And Magnifica Humanitas emphasizes that education is really a site for encounter with reality and talks about education as a long journey requiring patience and therefore needing time for the development and engagement with this reality. So in stating this, he's kind of rejecting a mechanistic interpretation of education. The kind of education he's calling for is not about efficiency or financial goals or gaining power. It's really recognizing that education and learning are intrinsic goals, not just processes that are worthwhile for extrinsic rewards. And I think it's notable that he puts the education section in chapter 4, which is talking more broadly about safeguarding humanity at a time of transformation, talks about truth, work, and freedom. And so he's treating education not as a standalone topic, but as an expression of the chapter's broader argument that truth is a common good, something that David spoke about already. And what he's saying is that one way we safeguard truth and reality is by educating for integral human development. And then he moves on. The second point is about schools as a sacred space, and he really carves out a leadership role for schools in the document. Indeed, one of the sections dealing directly with education is titled "The Central Role of Schools," as a place where students can seek and love truth, reflect on the meaning of life, and recognize the dignity of every person. And he's offering up schools as an antidote to this kind of move fast and break things culture that pervades Silicon Valley, and speaks actually to the culture of immediacy and hyperstimulation. And says, I noted the same passage that David called out, that schools are not called to follow the pace of the digital world, but to offer that which the digital sphere itself cannot provide. As David's noted, this time for learning and developing trustworthy relationships. So he's really making a values claim about what a school is for. The question isn't whether AI can make us more efficient, but rather whether our use of AI protects and strengthens the deeply human work of teaching, loving, learning, formation, and relationship. And the last area that really I think was important to note in the encyclical was this need for discernment and agency, both in the sense of empowering people, but also making us responsible. So Catholic social doctrine, offers itself as a foundation for collective discernment. The encyclical notes, helping to recognize and promote whatever serves the dignity of persons, the vitality of communities, and the common good. So there's a specific, mention in one of the sections about education that students must learn to work out when and how to use AI, that we must be educating people about when to use it and when not to use it. And if you look at some of the secular research that exists, there's a report from the RAND organization that over 80% of students report that teachers are not really teaching them explicitly how to use AI for schoolwork. So it's one of the things that many educational professionals are working hard and well to do, to guide students to make these choices. But it's early days, so we're still learning how to do that ourselves. And he's making the point that we're all responsible, teaching new generations that technological evolution does not follow a predetermined path, but one that can be guided by personal and collective responsibility constitutes one of the most valuable services to the common good. The document says, sort of towards the end of the document, outside of the part that speaks specifically about education. And this kind of presents a paradox. It suggests that educators need to emphasize developing students' skills of agency, advocacy, critical thinking and writing, public speaking and oral argumentation, and collaboration capabilities. And yet those are some of the very skills that AI puts most at risk. So those were the three that stood out to me, kind of the purpose of education, the sacred space of schools, and then this call for us to lean into discernment and agency.
Thank you so much. So let me complement both of those presentations with some direct quotes, because I really want to give people a sense of some of the language of the encyclical as well. And I completely agree with you on the themes of relationships and agencies and purpose and meaning being really key here, and on the discussion of education as not being reserved just to the part that really speaks to education directly. So here's Magnifica Humanitas, paragraph 83, which is on integral human development. Quote, "Development is integral when it is not limited to the economic sphere, but promotes quality of life in its spiritual, cultural, moral, and relational dimensions, while respecting our common home, the diversity of peoples and their ways of life." That paragraph struck me, and you can hear in it the mention, the respecting our common home talks about maybe data centers as well, and the relational dimensions of everything that we're doing, where AI might be interfering with relationships rather than helping to preserve or expand them. The whole mention of the purpose and the wealth of diversity of people is also something that resonates in this time when diversity is sometimes questioned as a value. Then speaking about learning and lessons, then not just within academia, Magnifica Humanitas paragraphs 99 and 120, I sort of combine portions of the two of those. Quote, "Even when these tools, the AI LLMs, even when these tools are described as capable of learning, their way of doing so is different from that of a human person. We, in other words, humans, carry within us lessons that leave their mark like scars, the memories of a journey shaped by freedom and failure, dreams and disappointments. It is only thanks to the interplay of these elements that the wonders of the soul occur within us, allowing us to sense the richness of our humanity." That idea that David started talking about, that our students are embodied, that they have their own journeys, that they have their own dreams and disappointments, those are the aspects that we sometimes forget about when we talk artificial intelligence. And the encyclical reminds us why humanity is magnificent and why there's this richness to it that we should not impoverish by focusing too much on intelligence. And then Magnifica Humanitas, paragraphs 139 and 140, quote, "In an era when truth is often distorted in order to serve particular interests and communication strategies, the field of education assumes decisive importance. Yet rapid technological transformations reveal just how unprepared we are on the educational level. The pervasiveness of digital media fosters a culture of immediacy and hyperstimulation, which gives rise to fatigue, boredom, and apathy concerning the effort required for seeking the truth. Education, by contrast, is a long journey requiring patience and therefore needs time for development and for engagement with reality beyond appearances. This is a fundamental issue because every technology shapes those who use it. Educating people about the use of AI then involves teaching them to decide when and for what purpose it ought not to be used. We must learn then how to exercise restraint in the use of AI and to protect our young people from the promise of the perfect machine, from that subtle temptation which renders human thought seemingly superfluous precisely when it is most needed." End quote. So those themes of pushing back against the notion of the perfect machine and of recognizing and educating people when not to use it, those are themes that carry through a good portion of the encyclical. I wanted to just stop and ask if you guys wanted to comment on any of that, or should we move on?
Irina, I wouldn't mind jumping in. I just really appreciate listening to you and Anne so much about this. I've been thinking a lot, going back. I mean, Pope Leo is an Augustinian, came from the Augustinian order. So obviously St. Augustine of Hippo is dear to him. And one of the things St. Augustine has wrote often about was that all when we know something, we use our mind, our rationality, our intelligence, but that's never separate from our will. We're always sort of, those are both operative at the same time. Now, that's a very complicated philosophical matter. I know that I probably don't even understand too well, but I think of it as you were talking, Irina, and in light of this conversation, because I think all those times where we're learning something, students are learning something, and you're frustrated, you're tired, you're angry, you're confused about what makes the most sense. You don't like the conclusion, but you think it's actually the right one. You really thought you knew it was right, but you now realize you don't, and you don't want to admit it. All those kinds of things, that is not just our mind working, that's our will being engaged in some way and having to choose finally, what we consent to as being true or not true. That is something that AI threatens and that I think has to be at the heart of all of our educational efforts. And I do not say that meaning we shouldn't really shape and help students who are outstanding in technical matters to learn how to use AI really well, but always knowing that even that work is going to be a work of the will as much as it's going to be a work of the mind.
And to reiterate some of the things that Anne was saying, that it requires time and patience and it leaves scars. It's not a smooth process. Anne, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so then let me ask you, one of the things we wanted to discuss was how these themes and comments align or contrast with some of what other leading voices have said in the area of AI in education.
Sure. I just start by saying Leo really converges with a lot of the mainstream critical camp around artificial intelligence when he notes the speed and ease with which answers or summaries can be obtained risks the desire to ask the questions. So he's, again, this trade-off that we're sort of identifying between moving quickly or the time often that true education and learning really requires, and noting that it might be affecting just the fundamental curiosity of students. They're thinking about posing questions and struggling with them, and that echoes claims that have been made by several studies and synthesized. There was a Brookings report that came out earlier this year that got some attention, and it said similarly to Leo's observation, when kids use generative AI that tells them what the answer is, they're not thinking for themselves. And the report notes that AI, again, prioritizes speed and engagement over learning and well-being. Another report, that one that I cited earlier from RAND, says that 61% of parents and a majority of high school students share these same concerns, that they're sort of losing their intellectual curiosity, being dumbed down, if you will. And this kind of cognitive offloading is, been around, I think, and other technologies have introduced it as well, calculators and keyboards and other things that have replaced fundamental skills. But AI is sort of turbocharging it in a way that it can really feel much more transactional, this sort of what you're trying to learn and to accomplish. And Leo really emphasizes that we should be teaching students to identify and safeguard the truth. And the Brookings report also notes that they're not learning to parse the truth from fiction, and it's one of the things that is at threat. So teachers' unions are reporting from teachers that they're seeing these same things on the ground. Kind of the pupils' critical thinking is declining, and so on the diagnosis of the problems, Pope Leo stands quite close to these reports and teachers and peer-reviewed literature on the harms of over-reliance. But where he offers something sort of distinctive in the philosophical register is the diagnosis that he puts it under. So rather than resting on kind of learning outcomes data, which a lot of people turn to for what we should be doing in schools, the Encyclical cites Plato's seventh letter to argue that genuine understanding can't be transmitted instantly, but as you've noted, both of you and I have called out as well, that it evolves only through over time and engaging with other people. So it frames education as the formation of the whole person, not simply this information transfer. One key difference between the Encyclical and kind of the contemporary AI and education discourse is that those reports tend to treat the core problem as one of calibration. How much AI, what guardrails are called for. But Magnifica Humanitas treats it as a problem of purpose. What is education actually for, and whether efficiency is the right thing to optimize on. So it's not necessarily incompatible with calibration, but it changes what counts as success. Most secular guidance lands on procedural fixes, literacy frameworks, disclosure rules, teacher training, age limits, things like that. And he doesn't resist those things, but instead he wants to not reduce the question to policy mechanics and points to this deeper task of discernment, which we've already touched on. So he might be possibly in tension with people like Sal Khan, who argues that AI can personalize AI instruction educational instruction at scale. Leo might say, well, really only a teacher can personalize education because a teacher is in that relationship with the student. So AI may be able to individualize it, but that's an important distinction. And I think there's a couple of examples that sort of help to see the differences between this kind of learning's outcome orientation and what he's calling for in this formation of the whole person and this emphasis on human dignity. If you looked at grading, for example, a lot of people, there's some reports that it can save teachers time if they use artificial intelligence to grade students. But again, the frame of education that Leo is offering says, well, no, it's that relationship between the teacher and the student. It's that knowing of the student and evaluating what they do that is so important. And as he emphasizes, the shared time for learning and trustworthy relationships. So in a school that is emphasizing that losing that feedback loop would be a real loss. And so that's something that should still happen between the teacher and the student. or chatbots. He didn't specifically talk about chatbots in the encyclical itself, but we know, again, from other reports, 64% of teens use chatbots 3 in 10 daily. And they're using them for casual conversation. They're using them to do their homework. Some of them are using them for emotional support and advice, even though there are reports like those from Common Sense Media that say, AI companion chatbots are harmful for anyone under the age of 18 because they're sycophantic, they simulate care that they can't really provide, and the Brookings report makes similar claims. So I think one of the things that, some studies might be looking at, there's one in Singapore that's sort of testing whether a chatbot can help improve mood and well-being and even student grades. And if that report were to come back with positive findings, they might decide to go ahead and use AI anyway. But a dignity framework would not, because it would say it's not whether or not the chatbot is working, but what kind of relationship the student is being trained to accept as normal. And here the Brookings report and others would agree that it sort of states it becomes very uncomfortable then to be in an environment where somebody doesn't actually agree with you, because the chatbot is always agreeing with you and always telling you how wonderful you are. So those are some ways that it sort of dovetails with what's out there in the findings from some of these other studies and reports, but still offers us something unique to think about, and particularly emphasizes how important this relationship and this community that's created in schools really is.
Thank you. So let me add to that I agree that the encyclical aligns with various research and anecdotes that show that over-reliance on AI can undermine learning. The terms being thrown around by researchers are things like cognitive atrophy, cognitive offloading, and cognitive surrender. And that distinction between the inner freedom and agency that the encyclical talks about versus cognitive surrender is really striking. I will say that I also looked at what Sal Khan had to say. Sal Khan, the founder of the well-regarded, much-loved Khan Academy, was an early promoter and supporter of AI in the classroom, and has to some extent tempered his enthusiasm. I will say that I think the encyclical doesn't engage much, if at all, with the arguments of proponents of using AI in education, the people who talk about the opportunity to do personalized AI tutoring or to help by clarifying concepts for particular learners who may not have access to, in-depth tutoring or parents at home who could help them otherwise. Or AI as a kind of debate partner as opposed to somebody who generates your homework. And there's some hope among proponents that the availability of AI tools will sort of help with equity in education, again, equalizing some of the lacks that a lot of students have. I think that Sal Khan fell into that group. I will say that in an article from this April, an interview with him, he acknowledged that there are a lot of limitations and that Conmingo, the chatbot that he developed for use in schools, has not worked as well as intended. And in April, he was quoted as saying that, quote, "Our biggest lever is really investing in the human systems." So even AI proponents have come around with more evidence to recognizing that it can be part of the solution, but it really can be, and it's not even the main lever. And on that note, I will add that there was a headline 2 days ago that read, "Anthropic unveils Claude for teachers, joining OpenAI and Google in race to dominate classroom AI." And that framing of the race to dominate the classroom is really telling. And that's part of what we're seeing, that on one hand, there are these, claims about positives and intentions, and then you're seeing this race, and the discussion of domination makes me think that if you're interested, you should also join the webinar on disarming AI, because we do not want a race to dominate AI in the classroom. But that's one thing that we're dealing with now. David, did you want to add to this additional
Yes.
conversation?
Happy to, and this is not, really, I think, connects very much with what you've just said, especially about the Claude for Teachers thing. So I thought of this question, this prompt, in some ways as thinking, well, what are some questions that Pope Leo's document poses to academic institutions, perhaps other places around, things like that? And three questions came to mind. One is, do you even need to use the AI? So I think that's a great question the document asks. Like, hey, everybody, let's just wait. You want to do something. Do you even need to use AI to do that? So that's a great question, number one, that I think all educational institutions ought to be asking these days. I think the second question the document poses powerfully is like, well, what is the purpose of your education? And I say that referring back, I referred before to, the problem of purpose in American higher ed is really profound right now. And I think the document poses that question in a great way for consideration. Third question is sort of, who's deciding? And for me, this question came up reading about the Cal State University system adoption of a contract with OpenAI for a couple $100 million to have all kinds of OpenAI chatbots licenses available for student use. I think to the tune of, Cal State system is the largest university system in the world, I believe. So several 100,000 of these things. So I was very struck. New York Times, long New York Times piece about the whole situation related to the contract just raised a lot of questions about how this all was decided and how much agency was engaged in bringing this about. I also had a chance to speak with quite a few of the student government leaders of Cal State campuses, and they also really raised profound questions about what are we doing? How is this decided? So I think, to me, Magnifica Humanitas really raises the question about, how is AI being kind of promoted? And then how do we as institutions have agency ourselves to articulate, discuss, debate, make decisions about how and where we're going to integrate this stuff? And I think the Cal State scenario raises those questions profoundly.
Thank you so much. So briefly, for all three of us, was there something in the encyclical that particularly surprised you? And so let me comment first on this one. It surprised me, this portion, in a happy way or in an interesting way. This is Magnifica Humanitas, paragraph 147. Quote, "Schools are not called to follow the pace of the digital world, but to offer that which the digital sphere by itself cannot provide, namely a shared time for learning and developing trustworthy relationships." I really had to sit with that, just with the fact that it was maybe the first time that I had heard a call for schools not to follow the pace of the digital world. Everybody else is telling us we need to, and that we should be speeding up. It was so useful to hear this different take and this call for a different pace. That, again, depending on how you see the purpose of education, and parts of education can happen faster than others. But the question of pace is really important. The idea also of shared time for learning. which means not just interacting with a chatbot or, personalized tutoring that really is about how fast and how well you learn, but the fact that it's a shared enterprise in which trustworthy relationships play a key role, and it takes time to even develop trustworthy relationships. I really appreciated that part, and I was surprised by the focus on paper. So what about you guys?
Well, I just observed that passage, we've all three cited it now and sort of and pulled something, emphasized different things from it. So it really does speak to an important passage, I think, in the encyclical. And like you, Irina, it wasn't so much it was a positive thing that surprised me. He didn't spend as much time on specific recommendations of things that we should or should not do in schools. He talked a lot about what we should do in schools, but not so much about what we should not do in schools. There, as I mentioned before, no mention of chatbots, but he did note the danger of giving young people personal devices too soon and things like that. But instead, he chose to paint this picture of what we should be shooting for. This, again, this integral human development and a civilization of love, which I think David opened us up with. He gave us a vision to point towards and to shoot for, and reminds us that that's the most important thing we're doing, which is loving one another. And there's a quote in there that says, "The civilization of love will not arise from a single or spectacular gesture, but from the sum total of small and steadfast acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization. For this reason, it is worthwhile pausing to reflect on some aspects of how we, each in our own way, can cooperate in building the civilization of love." So again, a message of personal responsibility. We're all to do this. And we all have a stake in doing this. And so to me, that was a pleasant surprise, to just sort of that emphasis on what we should be aiming for.
Thank you. And David, I think we're also kind of moving into a follow-up question, which is there a call to action in the encyclical? So what do you think?
I think in terms of the call to action, and I'll sort of maybe try to blend it with the surprise thing. I will say the call to action to me, first of all, I don't mean this I mean this as an educator. I think the first call to action is actually to really understand what the encyclical is saying. And I don't mean that in a blithe way. I mean to really, these are important, complicated arguments. I think they're rendered very clearly in the document. But I think it's really important to study it and to really understand it. I think to me, a call to action really has to do, with the general sense, he's calling us to action, to dialogue. But I really think of this in educational context as a call to action for, maybe it's a university, maybe it's a school, maybe it's a school district. Maybe it's a pairing of schools, Catholic schools in an area, whatever it is, to enter into dialogue, or in the term used in the document, synodal conversations about how to integrate AI into their educational structures. I think that, to me, is what I take as the call to action, a way to recover agency. And I'll just note very briefly about what surprised me in a beautiful way. The very end of the document, paragraph 233, where Pope Leo says, "The face that asks to be gazed upon, the vulnerable face, remains the center of our history." And I think that's a beautiful metaphorical way for us to remember what this is all ultimately for. Our love of those human beings, especially, and of all human beings.
Thank you. So I would say that's a broad call to action. I'm going to go back and narrow it down to the context of education again. And I will read you two more quotes. One is paragraph 142, quote, "It is difficult for parents by themselves to resist the influence of business models that monetize attention and time. Therefore, it is essential to form an alliance among policymakers, educational institutions, and families that is capable of concretely supporting adults in this task. And then Magnifica Humanitas, paragraph 147 continues, quote, "The Church's social doctrine invites families, schools, Christian communities, and public institutions to form a renewed educational alliance. This takes shape when fundamental principles are translated into educational goals, including," and here are some specifics, "teaching students a sense of moderation and limits, recognition of the rights of others and of future generations to enjoy the goods that are either provided for us or made available by human ingenuity, freedom and responsibility, and a sense of transcendence and the common good." So there's an invitation here and a call to action for families to have some of these conversations around the dinner table, for schools to talk about not just the ability to prepare for a job, but of the rights of others and of future generations to clean environment and to the dignity of labor. And the common good as something that is impacted by all of these tools tremendously. There's a call clearly to Christian communities and to churches, but I would add to all kinds of religious institutions of other religious faiths, and then to public institutions. And here I was thinking about libraries, that there is a role in which that there is a role that libraries can play in bringing together these kind of convenings and in building this kind of alliance across institutions and groups that would allow us to respond better to the challenge of the integration of AI into education. So we are at about 15 minutes till, and we promised that we would take questions from the audience. I don't think we have a lot of questions, so please feel free to add yours. Let me give you one comment to respond to. The comment is, "It is not clear that teachers are generally competent to teach students about AI." What are your thoughts on that?
So I'll just say I see a pretty significant investment in the educational community to getting up to speed to be able to do this, and some real tools and assets that are being created amongst educators to do that. Now, again, a lot of my exposure is in the Catholic education community. I really think Catholic schools are very well positioned to respond to this need right now, and in part because of their view and philosophy of educating the whole person, and the realities that they do make time and space for developing trustworthy relationships and shared learning. And these are things that they really lead with in what they do. But I've seen a scale that walks teachers through, or that teachers use to walk students through in very specific applications. This is a good time to use it to generate ideas. This is not a good time to use it to generate ideas. I mean, really specific guidance on types of projects to use artificial intelligence in. So there's starting to be this transfer of knowledge from the teacher to the student about this discernment that Pope Leo calls out around, when to use it and when it ought not to be used. And I think even the students, I had the opportunity to be in discussion with some high school students earlier this week, and they get it. They totally understand what the risks are to their own cognitive abilities. And they spoke so poignantly about worrying about the students that were younger than them, that were not going to have the chance to develop these skills first. Before AI sort of takes over and starts doing things for them, and how important it was to have those foundational skills. And they really are looking to their teachers to help them kind of navigate this path. So I do think I think we all were caught unaware when ChatGPT was launched, without much fanfare and warning. It certainly didn't give the educational community an opportunity to develop these kinds of resources before it was sprung on the public. But I think they've responded very actively to try and be able to guide students through that. And I did cite a statistic that said a lot of people don't feel like that's happening yet. But I do see the educational community developing these resources and starting to share them with each other broadly in a way that should help to provide that kind of guidance in schools.
So I suspect that the comment is more about competency to teach about AI, sort of in the more technical sense about what AI is and what it does and what some of its limitations are. And I actually agree that I think most teachers are not prepared to really do that. And we've seen various surveys of students and of teachers saying they are not getting, teacher training for them to be able to then pass on the information to their students, that the students tend to know more about the technology than the teachers do. And that has been a real lack, not just in Catholic institutions, but everywhere. Understanding the actual technology and its technical limitations is one of the best ways to learn when and why and where not to use it. And we are still developing resources, even at Santa Clara, but in most universities I've talked to, this is a work in progress. And the reality is that the tools are changing all the time and that the whole educational enterprise has been changed in the last 3 years or so completely. So in that sense, I'm going to contradict myself and say that the pace has not been great. I do think the pace of spreading a clear understanding among teachers about what this is and containing the misinformation and the hype that is being spread much more rapidly. The reason people think that generative AI is just search on steroids or, such mistaken claims is because that's the kind of information that's spreading rather than clear actual guidance about what these tools are. So I do think that remains a challenge. David, this is maybe more directly for you. The question is, I'm hoping at some point we'll get to the question of what Ignatian education can, will, should create as institution-wide policies and strategies to implement the values and teaching in Magnifica Humanitas. Something parallel and analog with the way Ignatian education integrates social justice so well into its programming curriculum.
Well, I guess we're just at the beginning process of this. I'm do find that there's a lot of existing resources. I'm not sure I'd make an analogy between social justice and AI as an integration, or I think the document just offers so many resources for a deeper integration here. I think that in part for me, maybe it comes a lot from demystifying AI. So we haven't talked much about it, but when we talk about human relationality and AI, I think as a framework, of course, we're not only talking about a student interacting with AI and that student having to kind of struggle through things, et cetera, but I think, say, the whole production kind of line of AI, the mining of raw minerals, all the labor that's gone into coding various images, a lot of human beings all around the world, maybe not getting paid much at all. Who knows exactly what's going on there? We should know all about that. Or about the use of all kinds of creative material that is the data that these devices are using, often without any compensation whatsoever. I think, it may take some time, but those are powerful claims of social justice, the document notes. And I think if we're going to really talk about the emphasis on human relationality, it means not just how we're relating here at an institution, but how we are related to all the people around the world who are on the production side of AI. And we need to know about that. and integrate that into our education. So that is a thought in response to that very good question.
I will add to that that I think the Ignatian concept of cura personalis overlaps so clearly with a lot of what the encyclical talks about. That sense of not just being about the mind, but about the body and the spirit as well, and keeping that integral development in mind throughout. Um, I've written a little bit about AI and cura personalis. David helped me greatly in thinking about that, and I think there's a lot more to be mined in that connection. I will also add that this is just the beginning of a conversation. As David pointed out, the encyclical came out not that long ago. I know that the Ethics Center will be working on developing a teaching module that we hope will be integrated by any organization that's interested in, continuing this kind of, spreading of more understanding about what the encyclical says and does. And we look forward to more conversations and more webinars. I have one question that I think is particularly relevant to Anne. How should business students learn to use AI to advance organizational profitability while also promoting the common good and improving the lives of underserved communities?
I saw that question and I had a feeling it was coming my way. I'm not sure that the way to think about AI is to be promoting organizational profitability. I think a healthier way to think about the role of AI in organizational life is in ways in which it will support people and how they will be able to use it to make what they are doing, come a little easier or take away some of the more tedious tasks. And there's a tool that I was part of developing with the Partnership on AI. It's got a very long title. It's Framework for Workforce Wellbeing in an AI Integrated Workplace. But it really is making the point that organizations need to be collaborating with their employees right now in more direct ways than they have probably for many decades in thinking about the application of AI and its uses, so that it's not just about driving to some bottom line equation, but it really is about improving humanity, which a lot of people in Silicon Valley talk about. We're here to do good, to improve things. And so they really need to walk the walk. They need to show that they're willing to do that as they're interacting with their own employees and in the choices that they're making in their organizations. I do think, and this sort of dovetails with the previous question, is a lot of very good work going on in many universities. I know at Santa Clara, we are developing resources that really will help teachers to help students see how the Ignatian mission is connected to some of the choices that they'll be making both in the classroom and then in their professions afterwards, things that will emphasize the principles like the common good. And have seen some great tools out of other universities. Saw one from Creighton that similarly sort of tied mission to choices that are being made. So I do think we're providing students with the guidance in these very specific areas exactly, but maybe need to think about the purpose of AI in a slightly different context.
Thank you. So I have a question that I will aim at David because you've worked extensively on academic integrity issues. One of the audience members asked, what does the fact that so many students are willing to use AI as a shortcut and even to cheat say about the younger generation?
Well, I love our students. I love students just as they are, whatever they're doing with AI. So I'm reluctant to make a really general comment about them. I do think, to me, it kind of evokes at bottom maybe a mix of both compassion and a desire to, um, kind of be, in a sense, in a loving way, firm about what Pope Leo has articulated in the document that, for each of these wonderful young people, it's great to learn AI. It's great to think about it. It's great to think about how to apply it to help people. But for your own sake, for the sake of your character, for the sake of kind of becoming the human being you can become. Um, it's better to really battle through difficult material and find your way, because you will find yourself by doing that. I will leave it there.
So let me add to that that I think all it says about the younger generation is that this is the first generation that had the opportunity to use this tool in this way. I think it speaks more to the kind of societal age that we're all in, where people are feeling overwhelmed and just trying to keep up and getting a lot of mixed messages. The young kids are definitely being told that they need to learn how to use AI, that they need to integrate AI into everything. It's only more recently that we're starting to hear these voices saying, no, you have to be really careful and discerning and learn when not to use it. That's the newer message. So I think it's unfair to think that there is something about this particular generation that makes them cheat more. I think the opportunity and the pressure is there, and that we as educators, it's really on us to respond, to help clarify the messages and to help them move toward, practices that are better for themselves as well, which is what we're all looking for. So we are at time. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you join us for the remaining 3 webinars as well, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.